Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, whether you're watching now as we do this live or as you're watching sometime later. We appreciate you giving some time of your day to consider the civil rights report that CAIR has just released. I'm Corey Saylor. I'm the Research and Advocacy Director, and I'm joined by my colleague and co-author, Farah Afifi. Farah, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Corey. Thanks for having me here.
So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the findings of our civil rights report, and then we'll talk a little bit about it to give you some insights from it. Before we start presenting the material from the report, though, just a little bit of context. CAIR started producing a civil rights report back in the 1990s after the Muslim and Arab communities were targeted in the wake of the Oklahoma City bombing. And we've been doing the report pretty much every year since then. So the first thing that we want you to consider when we tell you, like, we've been doing this for almost 30 years, is that this is the largest number of complaints CAIR has had reported to it in the organization's 30-year history since we've been taking care of numbers. And that's pretty sobering information. What Farah is going to do is walk you through the findings of the report. That takes about 10 minutes. And then I'll come back and I will discuss between the two of us just some of the observations that we have that we think it's worth you knowing. So Farah, if you would, go ahead and why don't you walk us all through the report and its findings.
Sure thing. Thank you, Corey. Again, my name is Farah Afifi. I'm the Research and Advocacy Coordinator at the Council on American Islamic Relations. And today I will be presenting some of the key findings and recommendations from our report. So I will go ahead and share our slides. The first graph that I'd like to show you all today from our civil rights report is the total complaints that CAIR has received on a year-by-year basis over the last several years. As you can see from the graph, in general, the number of total complaints that CAIR receives increases generally over time, with one important exception in 2022, when we marked the first ever decline in the total number of complaints received by CAIR. That decline, however, did not last for very long, as in 2023, we not only witnessed a 56% increase in the total number of complaints reported to our offices, but we also recorded the highest number of complaints ever recorded to CAIR in our 30-year history. To delve deeper into the 2023 data, we received a total of 8,061 complaints across the country. In terms of complaint breakdown, the highest reported category continues to be immigration and asylum cases. Similarly, as in 2022, employment and education discrimination-related complaints continue to be among the highest reported complaints to CAIR offices. However, I do want to note here, and I'll discuss this in further detail later on in the presentation, the number of employment and education-related complaints that we have received in 2023 is significantly higher than we had seen in previous years. Finally, I also want to note that unlike 2022, the number of hate crimes and hate incidents is now among the highest reported complaints to CAIR offices. To look at the 2023 data from a different perspective, we also wanted to show you a month-by-month analysis of the total number of complaints received by CAIR. As you can see from the graph, in general, between January and September 2023, CAIR received a relatively stable and steady stream of complaints to our offices. However, that abruptly ended in October 2023 when we witnessed a massive spike in the number of complaints reported to our offices, which persisted throughout the rest of the year. October 2023, of course, marks the escalation of violence in Israel and Palestine, as well as the beginning of the latest round of the Israeli government's violence against Palestinians in Gaza. In order to get a better understanding of what the 2023 data would have looked like had the events of October 2023 not occurred, we also decided to compare the monthly average of complaints received in 2022 with the monthly average of complaints received just in those first 9 months of 2023, so the January through September period. In 2022, we received a total of 430 complaints per month. In 2023, again, just looking at those first 9 months in the pre-October period, we received an average of 498 complaints per month. What we can conclude from this data is that pre-October 2023 would have likely seen a slight increase in the total number of complaints reported to CAIR offices. However, I do want to emphasize here that this increase likely would have been incredibly slight and nothing like the actual spike that we did end up seeing, particularly in those last 3 months of the year. Now, I'd also like to discuss some of the key trends that are emerging from the 2023 data. In particular, I want to discuss the very concerning rise in attacks that we have witnessed on everyday Muslims and American Muslim communities. In 2022, CAIR reported receiving 117 complaints of hate crimes and hate incidents throughout the year. In 2023, CAIR reported a 419% increase, reporting 607 complaints of hate crimes or hate incidents. I also want to highlight here that 472 of those 607 complaints were reported in the final 3 months of the year. This confirms what we have long known about 2023, particularly those last 3 months, which is that the safety and comfort of Muslims and American Muslim communities across the country has been significantly threatened by the Israeli government's violence against Palestinians in Gaza and the United States' justification of that violence through the use of anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian rhetoric. I also want to highlight the significant increases that we noted in terms of employment and education-related complaints. In our analysis on the left, you'll see that in a comparison between 2022 and 2023, the number of employment discrimination complaints that CAIR received increased by 113%. In the graph on the right, you'll see in a similar analysis of education-related complaints, and that includes both bullying and education discrimination at the K-12 and at the university level, we noted a 219% increase in the total number of education-related complaints. This again confirms what we have known about the 2023 period, again, those last 3 months, which is that employees and students have become targets, not just by external organizations, not just by individuals who seek to personally harass or to dox them, but also by employers and universities who sought to suppress speech in support of Palestinian human rights. This data is incredibly concerning for the state of American Muslim civil liberties. However, I do want to note that the report discusses a number of successes that we have seen throughout the year. In particular, I want to highlight the expansion of equal recognition of Muslim religious identity that we have seen throughout 2023. Cities such as Minneapolis and New York City permitted mosques to broadcast the adhan, or the Muslim call to prayer, over loudspeakers. A number of states also adopted the practice of recognizing a Muslim American Heritage Month. That includes New Jersey and Georgia in 2023 and North Carolina in 2024, bringing that total up to at least 8 different states. And finally, I want to highlight that we've also seen a number of school districts across at least 6 different states adding the observation of one of 2 major Muslim holidays to their yearly calendars. Before we conclude this portion, I also want to discuss some of the key recommendations that are emerging from our report. First and foremost, we continue to call on the United States government to call for a permanent and immediate ceasefire in Gaza. As the data shows us, the beginning of the Israeli government's latest round of violence against Palestinians in Gaza, as well as the United States' use of anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian rhetoric to justify that violence, has significantly threatened the safety of Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians, not just across the country, but across the world. I also want to highlight CAIR's continued push for the Biden administration to call for the dissemination of the FBI's federal watch list. Just last year, CAIR released a special report based on a 2019 version of the watch list, which found that over 98% of the names on that list were Muslim or Arabic-sounding names. CAIR continues to challenge this discriminatory and unconstitutional watch list, particularly in a lawsuit filed on behalf of plaintiffs who have faced negative repercussions due to current or past placement on the watch list. And that, of course, includes Mayor Mohammed Khairullah of New Jersey, who was infamously denied entry to the White House, likely due to his own past placement on the watch list. Before we officially conclude this portion of the presentation, I also want to add an additional analysis here that we conducted following the report's authorship. However, we still find it important to include here today with the rest of the report's findings. In particular, we wanted to get a better understanding of how this last wave of anti-Muslim hate compares to other waves of anti-Muslim hate that we've seen. In particular, we identify the two most recent waves of anti-Muslim hate as being, one, Trump's Muslim ban announcement in December 2015, and two, former President Trump's implementation of that ban in January 2017. In a comparison of the total number of complaints received by CAIR offices in the 3 months following each inciting incident, we found that following the beginning of the Biden-backed genocide in Gaza in October 2023, CAIR received 3,578 complaints in the 3 months following. In the 3 months following the announcement of former President Trump's Muslim ban, we received 1,098 total complaints. And in the 3 months following the implementation of that ban, we received 1,813 complaints. What we can conclude from this data is that not only is this wave of anti-Muslim hate that we are witnessing at the end of 2023 and into 2024 larger than either of these waves on their own, but it is also greater than both of them combined. Again, we find this analysis concerning and important to highlight here today as well. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to my colleague, Corey Saylor.
So thank you very much for, that's not the first time today I've sat through that presentation, and it leaves me feeling very sober each time we go through it. I want to add that we recognize that's a lot of numbers that we're throwing at you, and that's because it's an attempt to understand what the community and people supporting Palestinian humanity have been going through for the last few months. It's important to remember that behind every one of those numbers is a human being. So one of those numbers, Wadia Al-Fayoum, was a 6-year-old boy who was murdered while his landlord allegedly shouted anti-Muslim slurs. Another case that really stands out for me is a student in Georgia who criticized her teacher's Israeli flag, and the teacher turned around and threatened to cut her head off, which is those two things combined. We know the images coming out of Gaza are overwhelming, but those two things combined here in the United States, the level of hate it takes to target children is something I cannot fathom. And what it says to us is that Islamophobia had to be present in American society before last October, right? And I think that's something that everybody watching this understands. But it took something to flip the switch back on, where we went from our lowest, the first time we ever saw a drop in all the time we've been doing these reports, to erasing that drop and now having the highest year on record. So I think that, as we think about the individuals behind the numbers, as we think about what those numbers mean to us, those are two just very important things that I have in my mind every time we discuss this. Now, as you threw those numbers out at us, as you read through that very unfortunate tale about the experience of the American Muslim community over the last few months, can you boil down to us a couple of things that stand out to you from the report that's sort of not there on those slides that you presented?
Yeah, thank you for that, Corey. And absolutely, I just want to echo what you said in terms of recognizing that there is a human face behind each and every single one of these numbers. In terms of something that I would like to highlight here that I don't think is relatively apparent just by looking at the report, is that nearly half of the complaints that we received throughout the entire year were reported in the final 3 months. So we reported 8,061 total complaints for the entire year of 2023. 3,578 of those complaints were reported just between October through December. Again, this confirms what many of us who are in these spaces have witnessed during those months, which is that Muslims, American Muslim communities, Arabs, Palestinians had been attacked not just at school, not just at work, not just in public, but even in their own homes. 6-year-old Palestinian boy Wadia al-Fayoumi was in his own home when a landlord who shouted, "You Muslims must die," then stabbed him 26 times. I think that the direct correlation that we see in the data between the staggering increase in complaints and the beginning of the Israeli government's violent campaign against Palestinians in Gaza and the United States government's rhetoric, very anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian rhetoric to justify that violence, is open for everyone to see. Now, Corey, I'd also like to pass that question back to you. What did you find most shocking while authoring this report?
I want to flip that question, if that's all right.
Sure.
Because I think everybody watching us can hear the tragic tale that we have to tell, about this Biden-backed Gaza genocide wave of Islamophobia. And less apparent, in the report and in the news, is the incredible courage that a large coalition of people who oppose Israeli apartheid have shown. And it's important to recognize that when we talk about a large coalition opposing Israeli apartheid, Israeli occupation, and now genocide, this is a coalition that contains Muslims, it contains Christians, it contains people of the Jewish faith, it contains African Americans, Asian Americans, like they're people of no faith, Arabs, like it is a large group of people. And polling is showing that more and more Americans are beginning to see that Israel's onslaught in Gaza needs to end and are calling on elected officials to do so. So that courage that people are showing, despite this wave of Islamophobia, never ceases to amaze me. And I want to tell one quick story about an individual who, to me, just stands out in all the stories of people that we've heard because of his individual courage. And I think it stands in as a story for the whole community. So we've worked on a case where an individual, he really didn't have a way to get to rallies to support Palestinians. So he ended up just grabbing his own flag and going out and standing on a street corner and waving the Palestinian flag back and forth to express his own support for the Palestinian people. And someone came up and grabbed that flag and forcibly took it away from him. And he had the presence of mind to pull out his phone and record the individual. So he got the face and the license plate and he reported it to police. And then went and got another flag and went back out and went on another street corner and resumed what has now become a routine for him. And it happened again several days later, or a few days later, that someone came and again took his flag from him forcibly. And he did the same thing. Like, he recorded it and got the face, got the name, reported it to the police. And we intaked the case when it was reported to us after it had happened twice. And as we were talking to him, it had happened a third time. And his concern was he didn't feel like the local police departments were moving on it. So we wrote a letter to the two different police jurisdictions in which it happened, and both of them are now very quickly on investigating and making sure that people understand that you can't steal other people's property. But what I have the utmost respect and admiration for this guy, because even after that, he's still out on a street corner. He's still doing the protest. And now he has a small group that goes with him. So A, he's not on his own as a target anymore, but his just desire to go out and do something to change the world for a better just shines out and really goes to the heart of what we at CAIR are about, and all these people who are going out and supporting Palestinian humanity are about. So it's been difficult, it's been frustrating, but there are definitely bright lights in that. And Farah, if I could, I'm gonna sort of move us toward wrapping on this. When we show those numbers, 8,061 separate incoming complaints in 2023, we are always remembering that our colleagues at UC Berkeley's Othering and Belonging Center did a study a couple of years ago, and they asked Muslims, if you've had a hate crime committed against you, have you reported it? And 85% of the Muslims that they surveyed said they didn't report it. And they gave a couple of reasons, and we concur with those, and we add an additional one of our own. I'll run through the three total that we hear. One is that there's just distrust between many Muslim communities and law enforcement, given the experience of the last 20 years. Two, people don't know where to report it to. And in both of these instances, if you go to www.cair.com, we have a complaint form there, and you can file it with us. And we have attorneys who will review that, and they will sometimes take cases, or they will pass them over to us to do traditional advocacy work on those cases. So distrust with law enforcement, not knowing where to report it. And the one that just saddens me, but it's a reality, and that's that because oftentimes many people in our community have been subjected to multiple threats, it becomes unfortunately normalized. The way I usually describe it to folks is, I'll go to a mosque, and the mosque person I'm talking to will be like, yeah, somebody called in a death threat, or they said they're going to blow the mosque up. And I'll say, what did you do about that? And they'll, I hit delete on the voicemail, because we get that all the time. So as you're watching this presentation in your home, however you're watching it, the one thing we would just simply ask you and remind you, this is not normal. It is not okay to have people direct hate at you. America has a long history with these things, and the only way we're going to change that history is if we keep standing up and fighting back against it. So if you experience something, we just ask you to report it to CAIR, report it to us, and we are happy to work on such cases. It's your right to live a life without having people direct hate at you, and we're happy to work for justice on your behalf. So I think from my end, that's everything that I wanted to present to the folks who've been kind enough to join us. Your chance to get in last word, Farah. Anything else you think we should walk away from today's conversation with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is so important for our communities to know that we are here for them and that we are here to support them. But I also want to speak to our audiences of allies, of people who are not Muslim, maybe not Arab or Palestinian, but who feel deep sympathy for Muslims, for Arabs and Palestinians who are experiencing this and want to support them. And what I would say is one, I think it's important to sit deeply with what this report means, what it means for us to be living through and witnessing one of the worst waves of anti-Muslim hate recorded in our country's recent history. And two, I would say to take action, to go out there, to take action, to join a local organization, to push for a permanent and immediate ceasefire in Gaza, to support Muslims, Arabs, and Palestinians across the country who have had their safety threatened, who have had their comfort threatened, who are grieving, maybe lost loved ones, and to support communities in the best way that you know how. And with that, I think we can conclude, and we thank you all so much for joining us, for watching this live stream, for checking out our report, and we hope to be in touch and in contact with you all.
And thank you very much. And if you want to get a copy of the report, you can go to islamophobia.org. It's right there up top of the report of the website. Thank you all very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.